What happens when America's sweetheart meets Hollywood's most controversial late-night host? You won't believe what unfolds when a simple promotional interview transforms into the most explosive confrontation in talk show history. Tonight, we witnessed Jennifer Aniston's carefully maintained composure shatter in real time as Jimmy Kimmel pushed every boundary imaginable, leading to a showdown that has the entire entertainment industry buzzing. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two titans clash in the most uncomfortable television moment of the year. The stage was set for what should have been a routine appearance. Jennifer Aniston, radiant in a cream-colored blazer, settled into the guest chair with her trademark warm smile, ready to promote her latest project. The audience erupted in their usual enthusiastic applause, completely unaware they were about to witness television history in the making. Kimmel, sporting his signature smirk, seemed unusually animated as he shuffled his note cards, a glint in his eye that seasoned viewers might have recognized as trouble brewing. "Jennifer Aniston, everybody," Kimmel announced with exaggerated enthusiasm, his voice carrying that familiar edge that regular viewers know often precedes his most controversial moments. "Looking absolutely stunning as always, though I have to say, the lighting in here is doing you some serious favors tonight." The comment landed with an uncomfortable thud. Aniston's smile flickered for just a moment, her media-trained reflexes kicking in as she laughed it off. "Well, thank you, Jimmy, I think. Your lighting crew will be thrilled to hear they're earning their paychecks." But Kimmel wasn't done. He leaned back in his chair with that calculated casualness that signals he's about to cross a line. "You know, Jennifer, I was backstage earlier talking to some of the crew, and we were all wondering, and I hope you don't mind me asking this, but is it true that you've been using some kind of new skincare routine? Because honestly, you look incredible for someone who's been in Hollywood as long as you have." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the usual playful banter they expected. Aniston's posture straightened almost imperceptibly, her professional mask still in place but showing the first hairline cracks. "I'm not sure how to take that, Jimmy. Are you asking about my age or my skincare routine?" "Both, I guess," Kimmel continued with a laugh that felt forced even to him. "I mean, you've been America's sweetheart for what, 3 decades now? That's got to come with some pressure to maintain the image, right? All those procedures, treatments, the works." The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Aniston's media training had prepared her for difficult interviews, but this felt different. This felt personal and deliberately provocative. Her fingers tightened slightly around the arm of her chair, though her voice remained steady. "I think it's interesting that you're more focused on my appearance than my actual work, Jimmy. Is this how you typically interview your female guests?" Kimmel's eyes lit up at the pushback, sensing an opportunity to dig deeper. "Oh, come on, Jennifer. Don't make this about gender. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You look fantastic, better than you did 20 years ago. That doesn't just happen naturally." The audience was now completely silent, sensing the growing tension. Aniston's publicist, seated in the wings, was frantically gesturing to the producers. But Kimmel was just getting started. He pulled out his phone with theatrical flair, as if he'd planned this moment all along. "Actually, since we're talking about this, I have some photos here from your early Friends days, and I thought we could do a little comparison. You know, just for fun." He held up his phone toward the audience, displaying what appeared to be older photos of Aniston. "I mean, the transformation is pretty remarkable, right, folks?" This was the moment everything changed. Aniston's carefully maintained composure began to crack visibly. Her jaw clenched, and her eyes flashed with genuine anger. "Jimmy, I came here tonight to talk about my work, not to be part of some cruel comparison that reduces me to nothing but my physical appearance. This is incredibly unprofessional." But Kimmel, perhaps sensing he had struck a nerve, or simply caught up in his own performance, pushed further. "Unprofessional? Jennifer, this is late-night television. This is what we do. We have fun. We joke. Around. I thought you of all people would have a sense of humor about this stuff. I mean, you've been doing this long enough to know how the game is played. The game? Aniston's voice rose slightly, her anger becoming more apparent. You think humiliating your guests is a game? You think making women feel uncomfortable about their bodies and their choices is entertainment? The tension in the studio was now palpable. Audience members were exchanging worried glances, unsure whether they were witnessing spontaneous drama or an elaborate setup. Kimmel's house band seemed frozen, uncertain whether to play transition music or let the confrontation continue. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every micro-expression of disgust that crossed Aniston's face. Kimmel, either oblivious to the severity of the situation or determined to double down, leaned forward with a condescending smile. Look, Jennifer, I think you're overreacting here. This is just good television. People love this stuff. They want to see celebrities being real, having real conversations. Not just the sanitized PR answers you usually give. Real conversations? Aniston shot back, her voice now carrying unmistakable fury. You think ambushing someone with invasive questions about their appearance and then dismissing their objections as overreacting constitutes a real conversation? This isn't journalism, Jimmy. This isn't even entertainment. This is just mean-spirited bullying dressed up as comedy. The confrontation was reaching a boiling point, and everyone in the studio could feel it. Kimmel's producers were likely screaming in his earpiece, but he seemed determined to see this through to whatever bitter end awaited. The audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing what felt like the slow-motion destruction of what should have been a simple promotional interview. As the tension reached its peak, with Aniston's anger now fully visible and Kimmel showing no signs of backing down, it became clear that this wasn't going to end with handshakes and forced laughter. Something was about to give, and when it did, the explosion would be unlike anything late-night television had ever seen before. What happened next shocked everyone in the studio. Kimmel, apparently misreading the room entirely, decided to escalate. Even further. He turned to his audience with that theatrical gesture he's known for, seeking validation from the crowd that wasn't coming. Come on, folks, help me out here. Don't you think Jennifer's being a little sensitive? I mean, we're all friends here, right? The silence that followed was deafening. Even his most loyal audience members seemed uncomfortable with the directions this interview had taken. But instead of taking the hint, Kimmel pressed on with the reckless abandon of someone who had completely lost control of the situation. You know what, Jennifer? He swiveled back to face her, his tone shifting to something more aggressive. I think the real issue here is that you can't handle honest questions anymore. You've been living in your Hollywood bubble for so long that you've forgotten what real conversation looks like. Maybe that's the problem with celebrities today. You're all so used to being coddled that you can't deal with anything that isn't scripted praise. Aniston's eyes widened in disbelief. This wasn't just unprofessional anymore. It was a direct attack on her character and professionalism. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was ice-cold and razor-sharp. Excuse me? Are you seriously suggesting that I can't handle honest conversation? Jimmy, there's a difference between honest conversation and what you're doing right now, which is using your platform to tear down someone who came here as your guest. Oh, please, Kimmel scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. You're being dramatic. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle a little pushback without turning it into some kind of victimization narrative. It's pathetic, honestly. The word pathetic hit the studio like a thunderclap. Even the crew members visible in the background looked stunned. This had crossed every line of professional conduct, and everyone knew it. Aniston sat perfectly still for a moment, processing what had just been said to her on national television. Pathetic? She repeated slowly, her voice dangerously quiet. You think standing up for basic human decency is pathetic? You think calling out someone for being deliberately cruel and unprofessional is pathetic? Her voice began to rise. What's pathetic, Jimmy, is a grown man who thinks humiliating his guests is entertainment. What's pathetic is someone who hides behind it's just comedy when they're called out for being a bully. Kimmel's face was starting to flush red. Whether from embarrassment or anger, it was impossible to tell. But he wasn't backing down. You know what? Maybe you should have stayed home if you can't handle the heat. This is late-night television, not some softball morning show where everyone tells you how wonderful you are. The heat? Aniston stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward slightly. The movement was so sudden and unexpected that several audience members gasped audibly. You think this is heat? This isn't heat, Jimmy. This is you being cruel for no reason other than your own entertainment. This is you thinking you can say whatever you want to someone just because they're sitting in that chair. The studio was electric with tension now. Camera operators were zooming in, capturing every moment of this unprecedented confrontation. Kimmel's band leader was frantically looking between his instruments and the stage, clearly unsure whether to attempt some kind of musical intervention. "Sit down, Jennifer," Kimmel said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone that made everything worse. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" Aniston's voice cracked with incredulous anger. "I'm making a scene? You spend 20 minutes insulting me, questioning my integrity, calling me pathetic, and I'm the one making a scene by standing up for myself?" "You're being hysterical," Kimmel replied, using perhaps the worst possible word choice in that moment. "This is exactly the kind of overreaction that proves my point about celebrities not being able to handle real conversation." The audience let out a collective intake of breath. Several people could be heard murmuring disapprovingly. Even Kimmel's most dedicated fans seemed appalled by what they were witnessing. But the damage was done, and Aniston had reached her breaking point. "Hysterical?" Her voice was now shaking with fury. "Did you just call me hysterical for defending myself against your attacks? Let me tell you something, Jimmy. I've been in this business for 30 years. I've dealt with difficult interviews, tough questions, challenging situations. But what you're doing right now isn't any of those things. What you're doing is using your platform to bully someone for your own amusement." She stepped closer to his desk, her presence commanding the entire studio. "You want to know what's hysterical? What's hysterical is watching a man in his 50s think that tearing down women makes him look tough. What's hysterical is someone who clearly has no respect for the people who agree to come on his show." Kimmel, perhaps realizing he had pushed too far but unwilling to back down, made his final fatal mistake. "Oh, spare me the feminist lecture, Jennifer. You came on my show. You knew what you were getting into. If you can't handle it, there's the door." The studio fell into complete silence. Even the crew members stopped moving. The moment hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Aniston stared at Kimmel for a long moment, her chest rising and falling with controlled breathing. When she finally spoke, her voice was deadly calm. "You know what, Jimmy? You're absolutely right about one thing. There is the door, and I think I'll use it." But before she could move toward that door, Kimmel made one last, desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. An attempt that would prove to be the final straw in what was already an irreparable disaster. "Wait, wait, wait," Kimmel called out, his voice carrying a mocking sing-song quality that made everyone in the studio cringe. "Don't go storming off like some diva. This is live television, Jennifer. You can't just throw a tantrum and walk away because someone hurt your feelings." The audacity of that statement stopped Aniston dead in her tracks. She turned back toward him, her face a mask of controlled fury that was somehow more terrifying than if she had been screaming. The entire studio held its breath as she slowly walked back toward the desk, not to sit down, but to make sure every word she was about to speak would be heard clearly. "A tantrum?" she said, her voice so quiet that everyone had to strain to hear her. "You think this is a tantrum? Jimmy, let me explain something to you about tantrums. A tantrum is what children do when they don't get their way. What I'm doing right now is what adults do when they refuse to be disrespected." She placed both hands on his desk and leaned forward, her voice gaining strength and clarity. "You called me here as your guest. You invited me onto your show, and then you spent the entire time trying to humiliate me for your own entertainment. You questioned my appearance, my professionalism, my integrity. You called me pathetic and hysterical. And now you have the unmitigated gall to call my response to your behavior a tantrum?" Kimmel, clearly realizing he had made a catastrophic error, tried to backtrack. "Look, Jennifer, maybe I came on a little strong, but—" "No." Aniston's voice cut through his attempted apology like a knife. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to spend 25 minutes attacking someone and then try to smooth it over with, 'Maybe I came on a little strong.' What you did tonight wasn't comedy, Jimmy. It wasn't entertainment. It was cruelty. Plain and simple. The camera operators were capturing every moment, every expression, every gesture. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing what felt like a reckoning decades in the making. This wasn't just about one bad interview. This was about every time a female celebrity had been reduced to her appearance, every time someone had been dismissed as hysterical for standing up for themselves. "You want to know what's really pathetic?" Aniston continued, her voice now carrying the weight of years of similar experiences. "What's pathetic is a man who thinks that being cruel makes him edgy. What's pathetic is someone who confuses meanness with humor. What's pathetic is using your platform, this incredible privilege you've been given, to tear people down instead of building them up." Kimmel's face was now completely red, sweat visible on his forehead. He looked around desperately, as if seeking rescue from his producers, his band, anyone. But no help was coming. Everyone in that studio knew they were witnessing something historic, the complete and total dismantling of a bully's facade. "I've been in this business for 30 years, Aniston said, straightening up to her full height. "I've faced criticism, tough questions, challenging interviews. I've been professional through all of it because that's what you do. But what happened here tonight crossed every line of basic human decency." She turned to address the audience, directly, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "You all came here tonight expecting to be entertained. You deserved better than watching someone try to humiliate their guest for cheap laughs. You deserved better than seeing cruelty masqueraded as comedy." Then she turned back to Kimmel, who was now visibly shrinking in his chair. "And you, Jimmy, you had the opportunity to have a real conversation with someone who's had an incredible career, who's overcome challenges, who's worked hard to get where she is. Instead, you chose to focus on the most superficial, demeaning aspects you could think of." The silence in the studio was deafening. Even the crew members had stopped what they were doing to listen. This wasn't just a celebrity having a bad interview. This was a masterclass in dignity under fire. "I want everyone watching this to understand something," Aniston continued, her voice now carrying beyond the studio to the cameras and the audience. "At home, when someone treats you with disrespect, when someone tries to diminish you or humiliate you, you don't have to accept it. You don't have to smile and laugh it off. You have the right to say, 'This is not okay,' and walk away." She picked up her purse from beside the guest chair, her movements deliberate and composed. "Jimmy, I hope someday you understand the difference between being provocative and being cruel. I hope you learn that real strength comes from lifting people up, not tearing them down." Kimmel, perhaps sensing this was his last chance to salvage anything from this disaster, made one final desperate attempt. "Jennifer, come on, can't we just—" "No," she said firmly, cutting him off. "We can't. This conversation is over." With that, Jennifer Aniston walked toward the exit with her head held high, her dignity intact despite everything that had transpired. The studio remained silent except for the sound of her heels clicking against the floor. As she reached the edge of the stage, she paused for just a moment and turned back one last time. "Good luck with your show, Jimmy. I hope tonight was worth it." And then she was gone, leaving behind a studio full of stunned silence and one very shaken host who finally seemed to realize the magnitude of what had just happened. The cameras continued rolling, capturing Kimmel's face as the reality of the situation sank in. His producers were frantically signaling for a commercial break, but the damage was already done. The audience began to murmur among themselves, some even starting to applaud Aniston's exit. A few people stood up and headed for the doors themselves, clearly disgusted by what they had witnessed. The energy in the room had completely shifted from anticipation to something much darker: disappointment, anger, and the uncomfortable realization that they had just watched someone's career potentially implode in real time. As the show finally cut to commercial, the last image viewers saw was Kimmel, sitting alone at his desk, looking smaller than anyone had ever seen him before, finally understanding that some lines should never be crossed, and that sometimes, when you push too far, there are consequences that can't be laughed away or smoothed over with a simple apology. The interview that was supposed to be routine promotion had become a defining moment that would be talked about for years to come, a reminder that respect and human decency should never be sacrificed for entertainment.